the single most important piece of glue to all other skills.
We are talking with one of my heroes, one of my mentors, and one of the most influential men in my life, Dr. Kelly Cain. He was a university professor of mine and turned into a good friend. Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on and talking with me.
It is such a pleasure to see you and to be with you. It's been way too long.
It's been way too long, way too long. One of the things that really impressed me when we first met, which was in an outdoor education leadership course back at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, and you had and still have this inspirational energy that's underpinned with a real knowledge, but a depth of servant leadership. And I think that was part of that time in my life when I was just craving, how do we make the world a better place? And I'm still craving that.
Aren't we all?
Oh, what brought you into that realization around servant leadership, and what brought you into making your career in life, not just in that leadership space, but then the applications of leadership across sustainability?
Whoa. How many hours do we have?
Not enough.
At the time I grew up, a little kid in central Kentucky, I'd always had a really close affinity for nature. Hunting, fishing, chasing critters through the woods, living amidst segregation, to put it lightly, across the board. So combine this sense of living in nature with this trying to rectify those two was always part of where I started, and always that curiosity about how does this thing even hold itself together. I came out of Western Kentucky University with my master's in outdoor education, venture ed, et cetera. And to make the long story short, immediately took off for Wyoming for the professionals course of the Wilderness Education Association, which was the newest organization founded by Paul Petzold after he left National Outdoor Leadership School. And he was the first chief instructor of Outward Bound. I come from a long, deep, humbly privileged face-to-face encounter with one of the giants of outdoor leadership. I mean, to put it very lightly. He was one of the best-known mountaineers, outdoor leadership folks, and certainly in U.S. history, if not international. But I'm standing on the shoulders of all the mentors I've had around that, so you're just getting the passing of the ethereal sorts of genes, so to speak.
Well, that's how it's supposed to be, isn't it? And hopefully these messages go to my kids, your kids, their kids, however it works into the world.
So I went to the Tetons for the first professionals course that Wilderness Education Association were doing. I became a lead instructor, taught their first instructors course, ran trips in Wyoming, Idaho, Alaska, you kind of name it, on outdoor adventure, but the ultimate goal was always leadership development. And at the core of leadership development was judgment and decision-making ability. So I and my wife, Ruth, I met on the way to Alaska, did that for 4 or 5 years. And so we grew up trying to figure out how can you really not only teach, but evaluate and document judgment and decision-making ability as the single most important piece of glue to all other skills that any leader has to have. This is not isolated in terms of just outdoor leadership. It's leadership in every facet of life.
I referenced your doctoral thesis on judgment decision-making in developing the Australian Public Service Commission's course on analytical and critical reasoning that I designed.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you. It was kind of the treatise on judgment at the time when, and this is in the early to mid 1980s, when outdoor adventure was huge and rising sort of industry. So I came to University of Minnesota and did my doctoral work there in outdoor adventure. I started doing a lot of trips for Wilderness Inquiry, which was mixed ability groups, from literally going on anywhere from 3-day to 3-week, either canoe trips or dog sledding or whatever it happened to be. And it would be the most able-bodied athletes across the spectrum to folks with quadriplegia and developmentally challenged and everything in between. Hearing challenged, visually challenged, from an inclusive, equity, justice, diversity sort of standpoint in outdoor education. It was the front edge.
That whole social justice piece, it's powerful. And it's one of the things that I think you helped inspire me into when I worked with Wilderness Inquiry.
So as time evolved, while I was at University of Wisconsin River Falls, when I took a teaching position where you and I met, and was primarily hired in order to teach outdoor recreation, outdoor education, that sort of thing, which was great. And I started to move toward more the resource management side. Here's all these people who use wilderness and the outdoors, whether it's federal, state, local, whatever it happens to be, land managed areas, to what's the resource management that makes sure that those kinds of experiences are assured for the future. Having spent a lot of time in my professional career when I was at the university, and I served on the city chair of the Park and Rec Board, extraterritorial zoning board, the planning commission, and then we moved out into the rural outside of River Falls, and I was township supervisor elected for 3 terms, 2 years each. Early on, for example, I was a town board supervisor where we had a zoning ordinance. The policy was we're going to protect our best lands. The zoning ordinance was you couldn't build on the prime agricultural sort of land. And our land prices in the cities were driving land prices insane. There were farmers around us who, they're doing their best to eke out a living on a daily basis, yearly basis, whether dairy farmers or row crop or combination or whatever it happened to be. And the more that those land prices went up, the more that they would show up at town board meetings wanting us to allow them to get out of exclusive ag zoning, which didn't allow them to sell lots of land, kept them in that agricultural practice. And I don't say this looking for anybody's sympathy or whatever, but after 6 years and having people walk into town board meetings, sitting down across the table from you, and they clearly got a 6-pack of courage under their belt before they came in, pounding on the table, screaming at you, who the hell do you think you are? So I had my car broken into, I had a fake pipe bomb put in my mailbox, but it was in the last year in which my wife started getting harassed in the grocery store of what the hell is your husband doing? That it's kind of like, all right, holding tight to that sense of this is about the future. This is not about now.
What's something on your syllabus of life?
For a long time now, I've become, either for good or bad, kind of focused on the image of the hourglass. And I'll turn 69 this summer. And I'm still, as far as I know, I'm at the top of my professional game. But the hourglass is now kind of the image that I keep out in front of me. And I recognize that there's a whole lot more sand in the bottom of the hourglass than there is in the top. So that whole notion of, living in the moment and making the most of every day. And a couple of days ago, we're standing around the smoker full of ribs and chicken.
Yes.
We're having that life sort of conversation. And my brother-in-law said, look at this app that I just got. And it showed 7,000 and I think 38 days left. He said, if I live to 80, I have 7,038 days. And I'm like, holy bucket. I said, show me that app, because I want to set it at 70, which will give me about 500 days, which will keep me sort of, if I get past 500, then I can reset it forward again. That thing of passing things into the future, as I think about my own children, plus the clients that I have, and the degree to which we need to live in the moment and make the highest quality judgments and decisions in personal and professional life. And at the same time, we are confronted with a bushel basket of mega trends that tell us we are out of time. I spend the vast majority of my time now working for the National Indian Carbon Coalition, which is a nonprofit that represents 574 sovereign tribes of the United States, as well as Native Alaskan and Indigenous Hawaiian communities, and starting to do more and more work for First Nations in Canada. Well, most people don't realize, but the tribes own and control roughly 7% of the U.S. landmass.
Yeah.
7% in many people's minds is not, well, that doesn't sound like much. Well,
it's a huge chunk.
Let me tell you, it's a lot of land, and the vast majority of it is in really high quality, intact forest, grassland, arable soils that many of these tribes now have the ability to go to the voluntary carbon market with, as we think about the distribution of social equity, economic equity across the country. So as I moved in transition in that previous life from outdoor education, recreation to resource management to grad and undergraduate courses in sustainable community design development to carbon it has just evolved from, how did I get from judgment and outdoor leadership to now I spend most of my time around highly technical, legal, economic conversations around carbon offsets sold into the voluntary carbon market for sovereign tribes across the country. So that's where I spend time, and it invariably comes back to this sense of urgency about living life with high integrity on a moment by moment basis, whether it's the words I choose or whether it's the final product we come up with. Having swam in climate and environmental science for 40 plus years, I really wish I didn't know a lot of what I know, because the reality of the best available science says we're not in a good spot. We need to reverse that needle pretty quickly on many fronts. And we need to do so in a socially just, equitable way. The whole notion of carrying forward, living in the moment and living with judgment in a moment by moment basis is really fundamental. I've had to learn to let go of perfection and to recognize that any positive good that we can do that heads us in the right direction, and we can incrementalize that as fast as we can go, is a far healthier sort of modus operandi.
I teach policy here for public servants who are getting into the policy space. And one of the hard things and lessons that I teach is that the best written policy in the world that doesn't get support doesn't do any good. And so there's a balance between, we've got the evidence base, we know this needs to be done, how much can we push the envelope on what's politically palatable to get it accepted so that it does some good, instead of the best thing that we know won't get support. And then once that incremental step comes in, then set in the reevaluation times to see and then recapitalize on the good. So hopefully that grows in the most swift way.
Right.
What would you say would be advice from your experience in getting policy that you know needs to happen now, but to getting that across the line? Again,
it's a judgment about, all right, how far can we push this ball up the hill before it rolls back over us? It's making a stand on what you think is important, and in positions of power, being able to navigate that in the most respectful, equitable way that you can do that, recognizing that there is a future in which those decisions will snowball on each other as soon as you start to let off of the restrictions that may be associated with them. And here's the circumstances of what is in terms of where we know we need to be based upon the science, which includes economics. We know the price of everything and the value of nothing. There's that side, and then there is where we are and where we have to get beyond what those old values, principles, and practices that have been in place, that or no, even those are no longer an assurance that we're going to leave the world in a better place than we found it for future generations.
Many times, leaders who have influence, positions of power, whether they be positional authority or real authority or whatever, fold under the pressure. People can fold, but some are able to maintain, are able to say, no, this is so important. And it may come at personal cost or personal discomfort, but this is so important. And if we don't do this, like you say, it'll snowball.
It is the degree to which you're trusted.
Yes.
What you say, how you conduct yourself, how you support this bigger picture, regardless of whose it is that you can agree with, that you can support. So much of the ability, I think, to do that is grounded in the ability to have conversations with people with where they're at. So it's one thing if I'm out talking to corporate leadership, and I have a number of corporate clients where I'm talking with everyone from CEOs to people who are on the manufacturing floor. When I was in public service from a land use planning standpoint, it's talking to the largest landowners who own thousands and thousands of acres, over to the small landowner who's trying to eke out a living on intensive organic vegetables on a quarter of an acre. And the difference in the presumed hierarchy of power between those two and the degree to which each of them needs to be treated in a respectful, equitable manner, even though there's very different contexts in which that plays itself out. The ability to communicate across those lines is really, really critical. So from a servant leadership standpoint, or even public service sorts of corporations who aspire to servant leadership and can practice that on a daily basis, the ability to literally nurture that with their staff that they hope are going to mature over time, that they continue those sorts of values and principles and practices. The importance of communication of those are so critical, and to be able to put them in the context of how they're playing out on a daily basis. To the best of my knowledge, I've tried to live up to the idea of being a lifelong learner. I get up every day. What I learn on a daily basis, that is both macro as well as micro, is my sense of curiosity about the world, and then how I take the answers to that curiosity and feed that into success of projects and the success of other people is just paramount for me. So when I get up in the morning, that drives so much of what I do. And so my work with Indigenous communities is so much, I'm behind the scenes. Through the 40 years, most of 35 plus years of my professional life at the university, I was at the head of the parade to one degree or another. I'm now lost in the parade and provide knowledge, data, strategy that all I do is say, here's all the options I think that we have based on the data here's the data that I'm using in order to support that. And this is up to you guys to make the decision that you think is best for you and your communities in light of it. It's
Yeah.
here's everything that I can help fill in the blanks and help direct as you think you want to go. That's the role that I play. And I could not be happier with where I am in these, I'm in the final chapters of my professional life. And, with the hourglass, who knows how many of those 7,000 days I have left, but it ain't 7,000.
There are houses here, single pane glass. It might get down as cold as 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius.
That's tropical for us.
Yeah, but I remember some winters at your house, having a roast dinner and drinking red wine and philosophizing, but you didn't even need the fire on. And there's snow out there because the house was so well insulated.
Yeah, it's a passive solar house, and on days like today when it's sunny out, and it'll be, this morning I think it was about 5 and the sun was coming up. Yesterday we didn't even start a fire. It got to maybe high 20s to maybe.
Okay, so for Celsius it's below 0.
Right. We have wood stoves on 2 of the 3 floors. It's a southern facing glass on the southern side, but really, really well insulated. We don't even have a furnace. I mean, we've never had, so somebody will come in and say, oh, well, do you have propane or natural gas furnace? Or no, we don't have a furnace. This is a house that you live in. So on a day like today, it'd be 70, 75 Fahrenheit in the house. And there's not been a wood stove fire for 36, 40 hours.
Just maintains that temperature.
Yeah.
Yep. That's nice. I suspect housing here, we would save trillions of dollars if we actually insulated.
It works, yeah. Designed it and built it in 1990, and it's been been our home raising 3 kids, and we're on 5-acre homesteads. We got a half an acre of raised bed gardens, an acre of orchard, and it's on 80 acres that Ruth and I and a former grad student friend of mine bought and then carved off 4 5-acre lots. And the other 60 acres was held in common ownership and in the land trust conservation easement and Wisconsin managed forest law. So those 60 acres cost each of the families maybe $150 a year in taxes because they're undevelopable. We have wildlife. We have no kangaroos or koalas, but we do have a lot of deer and raccoons. And then the other 3 families all have their own 5 acres, and it was all about how can we all be, take personal responsibility in being self-sufficient, which makes us that much more valuable to the communities that we serve and the organizations we serve, and it keeps us all grounded.
There's a real theme here across where you're this lifelong learner actively trying to apply and live these values, not just of sustainability, but of servant leadership, of making the world a better place, both in personal, familial unit, but as well as community and broader out. How do you make that theme compelling for others? Because I think it's definitely inspired me in my life, and I know other past students of yours feel similarly, but I'm trying to look at how to make these ideas compelling for people who might be watching this.
I came from a family, my mom and dad came from dire poverty in central Kentucky. So for me to be where I am, they literally, tar paper shacks, which is a stereotype of Kentucky living. It was part and parcel to some of their family. And so the privilege that I have had to be where I am and how I live, it hasn't been without work, which I'm not afraid of, both physical and mental and emotional, blood, sweat, and tears. So it doesn't matter whether someone has the privilege of 5-acre homestead and or they're living in an apartment in downtown New York or Sydney or wherever it happens to be. There's every way in which to use that as a platform for doing what you want to be most proud of when it comes time to exit the planet. It's the experiential side of processing every facet of life. Okay, what did you learn from that experience? And I say that with all humility. And the difficult part, and I think this gets to your question maybe a little bit more, is that sense of trying to disassociate one's ego as much as possible. Because in my experience, the idea that ego is bad that's just a misnomer. Excess ego, clearly bad.
Yeah.
But if you totally disassociate ego, your sense of self-confidence is screwed.
Yeah.
There has to be some ownership, some pride in what you do with an altruistic motivation without appeering disingenuous or having results that are clearly because your ego found its way back to the surface, and suddenly there's a motivation there that is difficult to defend. I could run down a list of the things that occur when ego overruns genuine altruism that you can humbly, genuinely be proud of because of what it was able to help motivate you to get done. For the good of community, whether that's my little community of River Falls, or whether that's my state of Wisconsin, or whether that's my upper Midwest Great Lakes region, or whether it's North America, which the organization I work for now, we're expanding to a North American sort of context.
Every time I've seen public policy or public sector fall down, it hasn't been because of lack of data, lack of IT capability, lack of policy prowess. It's been because somebody's ego prevented them from listening, from consulting with people they didn't like, from sharing resources they didn't want to share. Those egoic arisings are what created the leadership failures, which created the falling down of good policy.
Yeah. Working in tribal communities, if listening is not, very intent listening as the first rule of thumb.
Because that's a difference when we look at consultation and genuine listening, and anytime that you are consulting or trying to push good ideas through, there is an interaction of values, differences that sometimes we unconsciously assume are the same, and they're not.
Good. Yeah. And it has changed over my lifetime, the degree to which the values, principles, and practices of collectivist societies such as tribal, indigenous, versus the non-tribal society that I now live in, and the degree to which tribal communities daily try to live up to intergenerational responsibility.
Yeah.
It's the old value principle of we make decisions based upon the last 7 generations of the best available science, in their case, oral history that they have, and any best available science and technology that now comes available to them in order to make the best decision for 7 generations in the future. That in itself is often inherently for non-tribal communities. That's the wonderful, noble, savage sort of, brush off, but that doesn't work in today's society.
We're seeing the results of that today with global warming.
We are.
Everything that's going wrong, increased storms and violence of them, and
And it's now snowballing. We now get into positive feedback mechanisms in which the ability to catch that curve. It's clearly in negative trends in terms of a predictable climate. By the Paris Accord, a 50% carbon emissions reduction by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. And the best available science is we need to be talking about carbon negative, not carbon neutral, because the goalpost will constantly be moving as we're making these decisions about, if we do this now, we'll catch that in 2030. Well, that's based on static circumstance, and that's not where this is going. It's now a matter of catching the curve if we haven't hit inflection, we're down close to it.
Yeah.
So catching that curve means that if we're not talking about carbon negative, so that we get ahead of where that sense of neutrality is, we'll never catch it. Would be mine.
Yeah.
You know, as we've covered the breadth and depth of my little place in the world, you know, I've been privileged to be able to do what I do, and at the scale that I've been able to do that. It is literally not without Ruth, who's been my wife of going on 43 years, who has supported this work. If it had not been for her, I would not be able to be where I am and what I've had the privilege to do.
That's an incredibly important thing, personal relationships to enable one another to grow and to be who you are. I know in my own experience as well, my wife, Rachel, allows me to do these things that I'm doing now, and I am stepping into myself. I'm discovering parts of how I can give more because I've got that safety at home to do so. I always admired you and Ruth and how you created this beautiful family, your kids, the home, the homestead, the lifestyle. And not that it's without tumult and, you know, chaos at times, you know, but there's this central thread of helping each individual step into their own self. You know, that's what's needed, whether you be a leader of an organization or you're trying to create a family or a community.
If you're a leader who's an island unto yourself, you are destined to be on that island by yourself. You either have folks who believe in you and support you, and because they believe in the same things that you believe in.
Yeah.
You won't last long.
Kelly, I want to thank you so much for spending time and talking with me. Yeah, you've had a really big influence on my life, and I know on many others.
That's mutual, my friend.
The work you're doing is going to make a difference. It is making a difference, and hopefully it inspires others to do the same. All right, I'll stop recording on that one. Thanks very much.
As I said earlier, looking like
we're brothers.
It's like you're the younger image of me, or I'm the older image of you, and yeah, it's still back there. Oh yeah.
It's yeah.
If I had 7,038 days, there's no telling what kind of debauchery I might get into. I'm just an old white hippie guy.
I'm not that much less old white hippie guy too.
Oh my God. This is one of those long adult beverage conversation. It's not a happy hour where you are, is it?